Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first Rules of Golf webinar. We had a couple rules seminars that were scheduled in late March and late April that are not able to take place because of the current COVID-19 situation we're in. So we wanted to get together to be able to engage each of you and get together and go over some of the most common rules of golf situations that we may run into on the golf course, and to review some of the major changes that took place in 2019. So when you hear us refer to the rules of golf or the new rules of golf, we're mostly talking about those changes that took place in 2019. For those of you that don't know, my name's Kelly Newland. I'm the Director of Rules and Competitions for the MSGA. I have the privilege of running all of our amateur championships. We also have James Hewitt from our staff on the call. James is the Director of Member Services and Tournaments, and James is going to be available because what we'd like to do here is we'd like to go over a topic, and then you'll see a question slide. And if you would like to ask questions, you can type them into the Go to Webinar tab. And I'll show you how to do that before we get started. But James will be able to help us answer these questions. We'll take some time as we go along and to review some of the questions from each one of these sections. If you currently don't see the question option, you want to click on the orange arrow at the top of your screen, and then there's a question tab if you scroll down. So you can ask your questions there, and James will be available, and we'll get to some of those. But again, thank you for taking the time to be here. I hope this is informative. This is our first time trying this digitally, so apologies in advance for any mix-ups or mess-ups that we may have. This will be new to us, and we appreciate you joining us today. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So the first slide here is a review of the 2019 changes, some of the major changes, and we won't have time today to go through all of them. A typical rules seminar for us is about a 4-hour seminar, but we hope to put more of these webinars together to cover some of the major changes. What we'll look at mostly today is how to drop a ball, what's involved in dropping a ball when we're taking free relief and penalty relief, and some of the relaxed rules that you'll see in penalty areas. I'm sure most of you have seen some of these graphics before. You're used to leaving the flag stick in the hole. We've gotten a lot of rounds of golf under our belt last year, not so much this year, but we've played with the flag stick in the hole, and we know how to play that way. But these are the two things that we'll probably focus on today, is how to drop a ball and the relaxed rules in the penalty area. Before we get started, some of the housekeeping that I wanted to talk about before we get into the rules, some of the materials that you may be familiar with or may want to get familiar with. These materials were put together in 2019. There are 3 books. You've got the Major Rules of Golf, the main book, that many of you probably have in your possession. There's the Player's Edition, which is the much shorter version. That's great for putting in your golf bag and keeping on your person when you're playing a round of golf. It refers back to the main Rules of Golf book a lot. So if you're ever in study mode or trying to learn about the rules, it's always best to have the full code, and the Rules of Golf, the main book, will help you in that regard as opposed to the Player's Edition. And then finally, the official guide, which is the biggest of the books. Most committees that are running championships or tournaments will want to have that with them when they're conducting an event. You'll see that most of our head golf professionals at the courses throughout the state will keep an official guide. It includes the rules and interpretations, some of the committee procedures, some local rules that can be used for championships. So as a typical golfer, you may not need to be familiar with the whole official guide, but it's a nice reference to have. I'll tell you, all 3 of these books, the best way to get all the material in these books is to download the USGA Rules of Golf app, and you'll have access to all this material. You'll also want to take a look at some of the interpretations and the clarifications to make matters even more complicated. The USGA has put out some clarifications on their website. You can Google USGA clarifications to see all the changes that took place in 19 to go along with these new rules. There haven't been many clarifications in 2020, if any at all. I think there may have been one update in January, but that's always good to go to the USGA website, print those clarifications out, and keep them in your book. But I just wanted to show you all the material that's out there as it relates to the rules of golf. So when we talk about the major changes from 2019 and the current rules that we're the code that we're following this year, we have to look at some of the new definitions. So the definitions, we always tell people that the definitions are a great place to start when learning about the rules of golf. You really have to understand the terminology and the definitions to really apply the rules and to understand the rules. One of the interesting things is under the old rule book, we had 52 definitions. Under the new rules of golf, we have 73 definitions. So the USGA and the RNA are simplifying the game for us, and we get 20 new definitions. You'll find those definitions in the back of your book. Under the old rule, it was in the front, but you'll find those in the back of the book. And I wanted to highlight some of the new definitions. Most importantly, reference point and relief area, the last two. You'll hear me say and refer back to these two definitions several times in this presentation and in most presentations, because reference point and relief area are two definitions that we have to use anytime we take relief and we're dropping the ball under a rule of golf. And we'll see that as we go along. Those are two new terminologies that we need to be up to speed on so that we can learn to take relief under these new rules. Certain definitions from the old book were modified or renamed, and we'll go through a couple of these. Abnormal course condition is the new term. It used to be called abnormal ground condition, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation, but abnormal course condition now includes immovable obstructions. And this is a good example of the USGA and the RNA getting together and simplifying the rules in the sense they put like situations together in the book, like situations that take the same sort of procedures on how to attain relief are under the same rule headings, and you'll see that as we go along. The other one I wanted to highlight was casual water. You'll still hear, even if we were at an event, you'd probably still hear myself and other rules officials make the mistake of still calling it casual water because we've known it as that term for so long. That's now referred to as temporary water in the new book. The reasons behind a lot of these changes, the new rules of golf had to be translated into several different languages, and casual water really didn't make sense in French or Italian. Many people would argue that casual water didn't make sense in English either. So now we have temporary water, which is a much better description of the definition. So those are two that I wanted to highlight. So once we have a good understanding of the definitions, we spent some time studying those definitions. Again, I would tell you, if you're going to start becoming better versed in the rules of golf, you really want to spend some time with those definitions in the back of the book before you start reading the rules. But once we have a good knowledge of those definitions, the next thing we really need to get started with the rules is to understand the 5 areas of the course, because the rules are going to be applied differently depending on where our ball is. And there are 5 different areas of the course that we'll go through. And again, this was changed from the old rule. We used to have 4 areas of the course, and now we have 5. And you'll see that bunkers and penalty areas are treated differently for a number of reasons. So that's why we have a fifth area of the course. So starting with our first area of the course, we have the teeing area. And it's important that the word "the" is before teeing area because we're talking about the hole being played. We're just concerned about the teeing area of the hole being played. We have bunkers on the golf course. You'll see here number 2, bunkers we're used to. Penalty areas will be the 3rd area of the course. And we know that there's been changes to penalty areas. You would typically see red and yellow penalty areas on the course for bodies of water. Now under the new rules, the committee has the option to mark areas that don't hold water as penalty areas. So for pace of play reasons, we may have this thick area of brush here where it's very hard to find a golf ball. If you hit your tee shot to the left on this hole, it may be very hard to find your golf ball. The committee can decide to mark that as a penalty area to help with pace of play. And we'll talk through that as well. Then we've got the putting green. So our fourth area is the putting green. So we're concerned about the putting green of the hole being played. None of the other holes at the moment. So that's also a specific area. So these are the 4 specific areas. And then finally, we have the general area. And the general area will include everything else on the golf course. So all of the fairway, all of the first cut, all of the rough, all of the tee boxes and greens of all the holes other than the hole being played. That huge area of the golf course, the majority of the golf course is the general area. And that's very important when we talk about the rules, as you'll see as we go along. So the general area is one of the 5 defined areas of the course, as we said. It includes all fairways, the rough, wooded areas, unless the committee decided to mark those as penalty areas. Areas of tall and maintained grass, as you'll see in the picture on the right, as well as naturally sandy areas that you may see down south, maybe if you're playing Pinehurst. And we'll talk more about sandy areas that aren't bunkers as we go along. But you can tell from this definition that the general area is the largest portion of the golf course, and it's a very, very big area when we're talking about the rules of golf. Moving along, the only places on the course that are not part of the general area will be those 4 defined specific areas. So the teeing area of the hole you were playing, the putting green of the hole you were playing, right? We're specific in that. We care about the hole that we're playing and none of the other holes. All bunkers on the course and all penalty areas. And again, just wanted to remind those that have just joined that if you'd like to ask questions as we go along, there's a question tab on the right, and we'll get to some question slides, and James will join us to go through some of those questions as you ask. So now we have an understanding of our definitions, and we have an understanding of the different parts of the course. Now we can start to get into the rules of golf, the specific rules of golf and their applications. And one of the major changes from last year that we're still getting used to is how to drop a golf ball. And you can see the picture down on the right-hand side here of the gentleman dropping from knee height. And we'll talk about the fact that when we drop for free relief, when we drop for penalty relief, we're going to go through the same procedure. And that's one of the biggest simplifications that the USGA and the R&A have made to these new rules, is that we're going to follow the same procedure no matter when we drop, if we're taking free relief or penalty relief. So dropping the ball in the right way. The ball must be dropped by the player straight down from knee height in the relief area. So you'll hear me talk about the relief area as we go along, and I'll show you what the relief area looks like in a couple more slides. The ball must not strike the player or equipment before it hits the ground, and you can't throw or spin the ball or roll the ball in any other way to influence where the ball will come to rest. So this little girl in the top right, she is dropping the ball in the correct way. You can tell that, you can see that her knee-high drop may be different than your knee-high drop, but she's dropping in the correct way. Which club you use to measure? So this is a new change as well from 2019. Your longest club, excluding your putter, defines club lengths when taking relief. So for most players, it's going to be your driver. What this really means is if you're ever playing a hole or playing around and you need to measure your relief area when you're taking relief, there's nothing in the rules that prohibit you from pulling your wedge out, for instance, to measure that relief. But as far as the rules are concerned, that relief area is measured by your longest club in your bag other than your putter. So it's important to pull that driver out when you're going through this procedure, because if the ball were to roll out of the relief area with your wedge, it may still be in the relief area. So just as a best practice, make sure you're using your longest club other than your putter when you go to take relief. And this is a great example of our relief area. So I hope everyone can see my mouse. But this would be the hole, right? This would be the putting green. Up here would be the tee box. Player here hit their ball into a sprinkler head. And we're going to talk about how we can take relief from the sprinkler head. So when we're going to take relief, the ball has to stay in this relief area. You can see this one club relief area. This is our reference point. I believe we'll refer to that on the next slide. This is the relief area that we have to drop into. The way we go about this is we find the reference point, which is the point that's no closer to the hole and gives us, it's the closest area that gives us complete relief. And from that reference point, we measure one club on both sides, and you can drop anywhere in this we like to call this the pizza slice or half a pizza. You get to drop into that area, and that's your relief area. If we need to redrop, so after dropping your ball in the right way, if it comes to rest outside of the relief area, what are we going to do? We're going to drop it a second time in the right way. So you can tell from this picture, same situation. The player would have dropped into the relief area and it rolled closer to the hole. It rolled outside of the relief area. If that happens, you're going to drop a second time. You're going to drop in the right way a second time into that relief area. What happens after 2 drops in the right way if it finishes outside of the relief area? So in this case, if we've gone through the proper procedures and dropped twice and it's rolled out of the relief area twice, we're going to place the ball. And we're going to place it in a spot where your second drop hit the ground. And if you've ever played in any events where you've had some of our rules officials on site, you may see us take our radio and the antenna on our radio and we'll point to the ground, or you can take your pencil or a T and point to the ground and say, place it here. So our officials get involved in that to help make sure we're putting the ball in the correct place. But you'll just place it where it touched the ground, where it hit the ground on the second drop. So it was quite a bit of information there in the first 10 slides, covering definitions and covering some of the major changes and how to drop a ball. Do we have any questions so far, James? I want to make sure I have you unmuted.
Yeah, we've had a few specific questions, but maybe a couple related to the teeing area and whether, how the teeing area is defined, essentially. Whether it's the hole you're playing or any other holes on the course. I don't know if you want to take that, or I can elaborate a bit.
Yeah, I think I can go back to this slide, not too much issue, to show you that teeing area. So, and this is a good picture of the teeing area. So the teeing area is going to be defined by these 2 tee markers, and the rules tell us in the definition, the rules tell us that the teeing area is going to be 2 club lengths from those markers. So that defines the teeing area. You've got your tee markers, and then you get 2 club lengths back. That defines the teeing area. As far as the rules of golf are concerned, the teeing area is not going to be the whole tee box, for instance, because that changes depending on what course you're playing.
And to follow up, the teeing area becoming part of the general area, if it's not the hole you're playing, essentially, like you said, it's not any other tee box on that hole or any other hole you're playing. It's just the area from where you started the hole from.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're playing the tips, let's just to keep it simple, if we're playing the tips and we hit a bad tee shot up to the forward tee, that forward tee is in the general area. If we were to hit our tee shot onto another hole in another tee box, that tee box would be the general area. So the teeing area is specific to the tee you're playing in those 2 club lengths to define that area. So we've got our drops. I'll also tell you about the questions. Like I said, James is going to pop in and ask questions, and we'll give some answers that way. But also, if we aren't able to get to all the questions, or if you stump us, which you're bound to do, we'll make sure and research those answers and email those out. We've got everyone's email addresses, so we'll get back with a question and answer document after the presentation if we get questions that we can't get to. But we're going to go over free relief next, and under free relief, we're going to cover abnormal course conditions, movable obstructions, and embedded ball, which will be all 3 areas there where we won't be taking penalty strokes when we get relief. And this next slide still has my pictures here. So abnormal course conditions are any of these areas: animal holes, ground under repair, immovable obstructions, or temporary water. And the reason they're all 4 of these areas are treated the same. So you'll see these examples down at the bottom. Our immovable obstruction example, we have a ball on the cart path. We have temporary water in the middle of the fairway in the second picture, and then we have ground under repair, which you're bound to run into on the golf course that the committee decided to mark with white paint. And the great thing about all 3 of these examples is that we treat them the same way when we're taking relief. So if we understand how to take relief, it allows us to be able to master a lot of different situations that we'll come across on the golf course. Interference from an abnormal course condition exists when your ball touches or is in or on an abnormal course condition. And we know an immovable obstruction is an abnormal course condition. That's in the definition now. So on the bottom left, this ball lies on a drain. So the ball lies on the drain. We know that we have interference because the rule tells us that if the ball touches or is in or on the abnormal course condition, we have interference. An abnormal course condition physically interferes with your area of intended stance or intended swing. So the second picture, we've got a player taking relief because their stance is on the cart path. So their stance is on that immovable obstruction. They're going to get relief for interference. And then we've got the example on the far right about where your ball is on the putting green, and we have temporary water that interferes on your line of play. This is a little more of a expert level or more advanced ruling situation if you ran into this. But the way we take relief from this, if our ball was on the putting green and we have this temporary water between our ball and the hole, we're going to get relief. If the ball was off the putting green, and let's say we had to play a pitch or a chip shot over this temporary water, we're not going to get relief. We only get relief if our ball is on the putting green. And we'll talk more about this as we go further. So all of that's true. There are a couple exceptions to relief from an abnormal course condition. So you're not going to get relief when your ball is in a penalty area. So this is a great example of this top right picture of a ball being on this rock wall. Typically we would get relief from the stonework, but because it's in a penalty area, you're not going to get relief. You've either got to play the ball as it lies or take relief from the penalty area. So there are some exceptions. If the abnormal course condition is out of bounds and your ball has interference from that abnormal course condition, you're not going to get relief because your ball's out of bounds. And then finally, the bottom picture here, this gets a little more complicated. And it's a lot of things. There's a lot of situations that involve a rules official having to. It's a judgment call, right? They have to get all the facts and make a ruling in this situation. But if it's clearly unreasonable to play the ball, let's use the example if this gentleman on the bottom right this ball were up against the tree in roots, right? So it's surrounded by the tree roots, and you can't get the club on the ball no matter what you do. No player, right? No player of any ability would be able to get the club head on the ball. Even if his stance were on a cart path, on an immovable obstruction, he's not going to get free relief because it's unreasonable to play the ball, right? It's impractical to play the ball. Or if you choose a stance or a club or a direction of play that is clearly unreasonable. So if you've turned 180 degrees away from the hole, just so your feet could be on the cart path, just so you could ask a rules official to get relief, that rules official is going to walk through that situation and decline relief because you're playing in a direction that's clearly unreasonable just to get your feet on the cart path. So you'll see that there could be, an endless amount of situations where this could come up, and it's really a judgment call as far as the rules of golf are concerned. There may be times where a player that has the ability, a really good player, could turn the club upside down and play left-handed, whereas others may not be able to do that. So they may be able to sell that they should get relief because they can flip their club up left-handed, and when they do that, they happen to be standing on the cart path. So again, that's more of a judgment call for the rules officials to make when you're playing around a golf. If you don't have a rules official and you're playing around a golf, there is a rule that allows us to play 2 balls. So if you're playing with your buddies, you could play 2 balls, score with both balls, and that would get you out of that situation so that you could get a ruling after the fact. This shows us how to take relief from an abnormal course condition. So when taking relief in the general area, this is all about the general area, you must follow these steps. So we've got this area here that's ground under repair. You can see the white line that's drawn around this area. What if this were casual water, or if this were a sprinkler head? We're going to treat it the same way. We're going to identify our reference point, and for these purposes, our reference point is the closest spot that gives us complete relief and is no closer to the hole. So it has to fall under all of those constraints. The closest point that gives us free relief that's no closer to the hole. We're going to measure 1 club length. You see you get 1 club length on both sides, and your relief area you can drop anywhere in that half circle. So you're going to drop in that relief area and taking relief. So that covers our abnormal course conditions. Another topic where we get free relief would be movable obstructions. So I want to talk a little bit about movable obstructions. They are artificial objects that can be moved with reasonable effort and without damaging the course. So that's what's most important when you're talking about whether an obstruction is movable or immovable. If it causes damage by you moving it, it's most likely not a movable obstruction. And we've got 3 examples on the bottom here. This little irrigation flag can be moved easily without causing damage. We're used to the rakes on the golf course. Rakes are movable obstructions. And then this USGA sign that might be on the first tee, that's a movable obstruction, right? We can pull those out of the ground without causing damage to the course. Movable obstructions can be moved anywhere on or off the golf course. So bunkers. What if we had a ball in a bunker and we had a soda can that was left or a Snickers wrapper? We can move that obstruction, right? We're allowed to move that in the bunkers. From the penalty area standpoint, the stake, the red stake here, is a movable obstruction. We can move that stake. If there is a movable obstruction that's out of bounds, we can move the movable obstruction. This picture is a little misleading because remember that out of bounds stakes are fixed, so don't pull the out of bounds stake. You can get penalized for that if you don't put it back. But if we had, like I said, a Snickers wrapper, soda can, a rake, anything that was out of bounds that was interfering, but our ball was inbounds and we could play, we can move that movable obstruction. And then, of course, on the general area, we can move any movable obstruction. So you can move movable obstructions anywhere on or off the golf course. This is probably what we run into the most. Our ball comes to rest up against a rake. If your ball moves when you move the movable obstruction, this is pretty easy. There's no penalty, but you must replace the ball. So you can move that rake, and if the ball moves, you just got to make sure that you replace the ball in its original spot. If you don't replace the ball on the original spot, you're going to have played from a wrong place and most likely get the general penalty in that instance. So you get a 2-stroke penalty in stroke play or a loss of hole in match play. So you've got to make sure that when you move the movable obstruction, you make sure to put the ball back. So moving along with some free relief, and we'll come up on a question slide here shortly. Another instance of free relief is an embedded ball. And this is a good slide that shows you what an embedded ball is and what it isn't. So your ball is embedded only if it is in its own pitch mark made as a result of your previous stroke. The way I like to think of this, I mean, if you have a player that hits a worm burner, as we used to call it in Kentucky, I don't know what we call it in Maryland, but if you hit a really low, terrible drive and it skids across the fairway, then you come up to your second shot and you realize that it's in a plug or it's in a pitch mark. I would say most likely it's not your pitch mark, right, from the type of shot you hit. But if you hit a normal drive, and let's say that it's, let's say it's a blind shot, we're not playing on tour, so we don't have all the spectators and all the eyes and the cameras on our shots that the tour players have. So if you come across your drive on a typical shot and it's embedded in a pitch mark, it's most likely embedded in your pitch mark, and that's how you would interpret that. But I just wanted to make the point that, if you know that that's not your pitch mark, if it just happened to embed or land in an old pitch mark, that's not an embedded ball. But as you can see, the ball has to break, is below the level of the ground, doesn't necessarily have to break the ground. The second picture is a good example of that. We haven't broke the level of the ground, but it's below the level of the ground and definitely cause an indention here. And that ball is going to be embedded, and we can take relief. We're going to be doing this anywhere in the general area for embedded ball. But it's important to remember that there is no free relief if your ball embeds in a bunker, if your ball embeds in a penalty area, or naturally sandy areas in the general area. And that one would make sense if you think about some of the courses down south, right? I think Pinehurst was the one I mentioned earlier, but so many of them down there. The ball embeds in those naturally sandy areas that aren't bunkers. It just doesn't make sense for us to give free relief throughout the round for that. So you may not run into that here in Maryland as much, but free relief, there's no free relief in bunkers, penalty areas, or naturally sandy areas. So how do we take relief from an embedded ball? And for those of you that remember, this is a change. Under the old rule, it was kind of an interesting rule. If this were the general area, you could pick your ball up, clean it, and then you try to drop it as close to that spot as possible. And there's some funny videos that we used to show of people trying to drop as close as possible to their embedded ball as possible. But now the new relief situation, we're going to go through the same procedure, taking relief as we do for everything else. So this is when we talk about simplified rules. You're going to go right back to finding your reference point and your relief area, just as we do for everything else. So we found our reference point, which in this case is going to be the spot right behind where the ball is embedded. We get one club length on both sides, and we drop into that relief area. The relief area must be in the general area, which is another good caveat of that rule. So we have to drop into the relief area when we're taking relief from embedded ball. Any questions on that, James?
Yeah, one recent question was, what if your ball is embedded in another player's divot? It would still, everything that you described would still apply there if it was actually embedded in that player's divot. If it's just in the divot but not embedded, then you just play it as it lies.
Yeah, so if under that situation where it's not your pitch mark, it's someone else's pitch mark, you're either going to have to play the ball as it lies or take relief under unplayable ball, which we'll go over. I think it's the next section or two sections later. We'll actually go over unplayable ball, but you won't get free relief if it's someone else's pitch mark. You'll have to play it or take a unplayable.
I think the question was a divot, not a pitch mark, but an actual divot.
Yeah, same situation. So you're not going to get relief from divots. And there's been a lot of conversation about that, especially with the new rules changing back in 2019, whether the USGA was going to give relief for divots. Divots, you still have to play out of divots, right? So there's no relief from that. And that kind of goes back to the mindset that, people ask that question because you hit a perfect drive in the middle of the fairway and your ball ends up in a divot and it doesn't feel fair. But there's a lot of things about golf that aren't necessarily fair, right? So sometimes we hit a bad shot into the rough and we get a perfect lie. So the argument to that is, if we give relief for divots in the fairway, should we go step on all the perfect lies that are in the rough?
Right. I think
that was some of the conversation that came out of that.
I think that the question was, if somebody else made a divot and then your ball was embedded in the actual divot, would you be entitled to relief in that case?
So someone makes a divot and your ball embeds in that divot?
Yes. Yeah, from a shot that you hit and landed in that divot and embedded. We can follow up on that one after. So.
Good question. Now we'll talk about some penalty relief. Unplayable ball is going to be one of those that I mentioned earlier. And penalty areas, yellow and red penalty areas, which we should be pretty familiar with. Unplayable ball relief, you can use the unplayable ball relief options if your ball lies in the general area, in a bunker, in the teeing area, or on the putting green. So there's one area of the course where unplayable ball relief is not available, and that is in a penalty area. So if your ball's in a penalty area, you cannot take unplayable ball relief. You have to take the penalty area relief. And here are some of the options, or the three options we have under ball unplayable in the general area. So we have stroke and distance. We know that as a player, we can always go back and play from the place where we last made a stroke. When we do this, the spot of our previous stroke is going to be the reference point, and we're going to drop within one club length of where our previous stroke was made. So you can see the relief area here under stroke and distance. So that's one option. This second slide picture is a little misleading. Forget that the bunker's here. That's the best way to do this. This ball we're talking about taking unplayable relief from a ball in the general area. So if this ball were plugged, I'm sorry, if this ball were in a spot where the player wanted to take an unplayable lie in the general area, one of our options is to go back on the line for relief. So you go back on the line, and you can drop anywhere that you want back on this line. You pick a spot, and now we've got a relief area, right? We measure 1 club length on both sides, and we can drop in that relief area. And then finally, lateral relief. We always have the option for lateral relief under ball and playable. We can use 2 club lengths from where the ball is on both sides, and we can drop in that area. So that's a much bigger circle here, half circle. We get 2 club lengths from that, from where the ball is to take an unplayable ball. So those are our 3 options for ball and playable. We'll talk about bunkers. It's either this next slide or 2 slides from now. We'll talk about how to take relief from a ball and playable in the bunker. So this is back to, we're still talking about the general area. For 1 penalty stroke, you may take back on the line relief. You identify the ball as yours. You must find the ball to take a ball and playable. In the general area, you pick a point on a straight line, keeping the point where the ball lies between you and the flag stick. That's your reference point. And you drop a ball within 1 club length of the reference point in the general area, not near the hole. That's our relief area. So kind of a repeat of a rehash of what I just stated, but that's going to be your relief area. Another option under the one penalty, like we said, is the lateral relief. You're going to identify that it's your ball. That's your reference point. So to use this option, we have to find the ball. That's your reference point. You take 2 club lengths on either side of the ball, and you can drop into that relief area. So one of the disadvantages of the webinar is that we weren't able to get the videos to work. They're really choppy, so we had to take some of these videos out. The USGA has some great videos on their YouTube channel. If you Google USGA rules in YouTube, you'll find some awesome videos that they put together. But I wanted to point out that in a bunker, you still have your options, right? So if my ball was embedded in the bunker, I can still go back and play stroke and distance for a 1-stroke penalty. For option number 2 and option number 3, I can take those options in the bunker, but I have to stay in the bunker. So I can go back on the line from the flag stick if my ball is embedded in a bunker, but I have to stay in the bunker. I can take lateral relief from where that ball is plugged in the bunker, take 2 club lengths on both sides, but I have to stay in the bunker for 1-stroke penalty. The USGA added a new option for last year that we're still playing under this year. For 2 penalty strokes, you can take back on the line relief out of the bunker. So I just wanted to clarify that. All the 1-stroke penalty options that are available when your ball's embedded in a bunker, all the 1-stroke penalties, you have to stay in the bunker for option 2 and 3, and then of course stroke and distance you can go back and play from where you last played from. That may have been a quick question slide, James.
I think we're all caught up here right now, so we can keep moving.
Okay, perfect. So our next area to talk about when taking penalty relief would be a penalty area. So to understand penalty areas, places on the course where your ball often is not found is typically very difficult or impossible to play. It's kind of like that area I was talking about earlier, that really dense area, overgrown area that the committee decided to mark as a penalty area. That's a new option for us, and we can use that. Any body of water on the course, including sea, lake, a pond, river, any open water on the golf course would be a penalty area, even if it doesn't contain water at the time. So even if it's a dry creek bed, a dried up lake, that would be a penalty area. Also, penalty areas are any other area in the course marked or defined by the committee as a penalty area, including deserts, densely wooded or overgrown areas, jungles, lava rock fields. So some of these we don't have to worry about here, right? We don't see many lava rock fields or deserts. But this new rule was a major change, and I know many of you are familiar with this, but your local golf course or your golf committee could mark your golf course now, and they have a lot more leeway in what they can define as penalty areas. We have 2 types of penalty areas. We have red and yellow. Yellow has 2 relief options and red has 3 relief options, and we'll go through each of these. If the color has not been marked or indicated, so if we're playing a course where the penalty area hasn't been marked, we're going to treat that as a red penalty area. You may take penalty area relief when your ball lies in a penalty area, or you have knowledge or virtual certainty that your ball is in a penalty area, even if you can't find it. And this is one of the things, this is one of the concepts that a lot of players struggle with, knowledge or virtual certainty. And we got a little more clarification with the new rules. So I want to read this and then talk a little bit about what knowledge and virtual certainty is. So having knowledge or virtual certainty means there is conclusive evidence that your ball is in the penalty area. So we have to have 95% or more likelihood that your ball is in the penalty area. It is 95% or more likely that your ball is in the penalty area. So I wanted to talk about, and I think, again, this is a good picture here. If this player is looking for their tee shot, right? So we hook, maybe we're on the tee and we hooked our tee shot toward the water. We didn't see it go in the water, but we get back to this area where the ball should be. If you'll notice, the grass is really short. There's no trees, there's no bushes. There's really nowhere else for the ball to be. I would think if we got to this area, we could be virtually certain that that ball is in the water. What happens a lot of times is you'll see players that, you'll hit your ball and it'll ricochet off a couple of trees, or you'll see it go up in a tree, not necessarily come back down. When we get to that position as a rules official, we always ask the player, is there anywhere else your ball could be? And if the player says, well, yeah, it could be in that long grass over there. It could be up in the tree. It could have hit the tree and kicked over to the other side of the fairway. If you start seeing that that's the answer, more likely than not, we don't have virtual certainty. And if we don't have virtual certainty, we can't use the penalty area rule. So that's the most important concept with knowledge and virtual certainty when we talk about relief. And it happens a lot, because no player really wants to get down here and then have to walk all the way back to the tee and play a lost ball. But if you don't have knowledge of virtual certainty, you have to play that way. You can't take penalty relief. So red penalty area. Here are 3 options for red penalty area relief. Again, stroke and distance. We've always got the option to go back and play from the place that we last made a stroke. Again, that reference point is going to be where you played from, and you're going to have that relief area, just like you will for everything else. Drop in that relief area. Back on the line relief, you're going to drop on the line between where the ball last entered the penalty area and the flag stick behind the penalty area. So we're going to go to where the ball last crossed the edge of the penalty area, take that spot, the flag stick, and go back on that line as far as we'd like, with no restrictions there as far back as we'd like to go. And you're going to be able to get a club length on both sides and drop in the relief area. For the lateral relief, and you can tell here, when you're taking 2 club lengths from the edge of the red penalty area, you can take 2 club lengths and drop in that relief area. You're not necessarily guaranteed to have this half circle. This player here may only have a quarter of the circle to drop in. So as a player, you're not guaranteed to have that whole area to drop in. You'll see here he takes 2 club lengths and he has to drop in that slice that's his relief area when taking the drop. Yellow penalty areas. So we've got the same 2 options for yellow penalty areas. We just don't have the lateral relief, the 2 club length lateral relief. So stroke and distance and back on the line relief options are the only ones available for the yellow penalty. And if this player were playing over this penalty area and it happened to be marked yellow, a lot of people, this comes up quite a bit too. If this happened to be yellow and we played across and it crossed over here and then kicked back in, that's going to be our reference point to use when going back on the line, right? When we're taking back on the line relief. So that would be our point. The flag sticks here. We may have to drop back in here, if that makes sense. We don't get to drop on the other side of the lake if it's a yellow penalty area. If it's red, we can take our 2 club lengths and drop on the other side of the lake. Any questions on penalty area relief? And I may give you guys a minute because I put question slides a little close together.
Kelly, I didn't have any that were too mostly specific ones, I guess, that were for penalty area relief. One that was a little further back about embedded ball in a bunker. That was just the question was, how do you treat an embedded ball in the wall of a bunker? So that would be by definition not actually in the bunker, and the embedded ball rule relief, assuming that no part of the ball is in the bunker and it's considered in the general area, would be.
Yeah. So James, that one's a fun one, and most people aren't going to like the answer to that one. We actually talked to David Stabler with USGA. He comes in once a year to do a rules seminar for us. If your ball embeds in the wall of the wall of the bunker is not part of the bunker. So it's part of the general area, right? If it's not part of the bunker, it's going to be part of the general area, like James talked about. So your ball's embedded in this wall of the bunker that's the general area, and there's no real way to take relief to find a reference point and drop in the general area as the rule requires us to do. So there may be a circumstance where you may have a little sliver on the left or right side of a bunker that you can drop into, but a lot of times you're not going to have a place to drop. So in that situation, in that very narrow situation where ball embeds in the wall, then you're going to have to take a one-stroke penalty and take a ball unplayable, or take a swing at it. Those are going to be your two options. So I think that personally, I think that's one of the rules that the USGA may need to go back and look at, because that's going to be a really tough ruling when we get those at the top level. It's just a really bad break if you get your ball embedded in the wall bunker. So we talked about penalty areas. It's important to know some of the relaxed rules and some of the restrictions that have been lifted on penalty areas. You're now allowed to ground your club and move loose impediments in a penalty area. And we're going to talk about what loose impediments are, so that we know what we can move in a penalty area. So loose impediments are natural objects that are not attached to anything, no longer part of something growing. They're not embedded, not solidly embedded in the ground, and they're not adhering to your golf ball. So these are all examples of loose impediments. We have a leaf, that would be a loose impediment. These pine cones, this straw, this that's not attached would be a loose impediment, and these pebbles are loose impediments. If you have anything that's still attached to the ground or still growing, then those are not loose impediments. But these are all loose impediments, and without penalty, you are allowed to move them out of your way no matter where they are on or off the golf course. And these are back to common examples. So the stones, leaves, branches, and sticks, pine needles. Other items that you may not think of, but worms and insects and spiders, living or dead, are also loose impediments. Clumps of soil and sand, but not loose soil and sand, are part of are loose impediments. We'll see that soil and sand, loose soil and sand, are treated differently on the putting green than anywhere else. Animal waste and dead animals. You may not want to touch these, but if you'd like to, you can move them. So that may be one of those times where you take your club and move them. But those are considered loose impediments. So loose impediments anywhere on or off the course may be touched or removed without penalty. This includes when your ball and the loose impediment are in the same bunker. So this is important, and I know it's a major change that we've gotten used to. But you can move loose impediments in the bunker now. However, if you cause your ball to move, you're going to get a penalty. So you have to be very careful about this. If you had a lot of different leaves around your ball and you started moving all of them, if you cause your ball to move, you're going to get a one-stroke penalty, and then you've got to replace the ball. So you've still got to be very cautious in the bunkers. When your ball is in a bunker, and remember, we treat bunkers, when we looked at those 5 areas of the course, bunkers and penalty areas are treated differently. And there's reasons for that, because there's certain things you can do in a penalty area that you can't do in a bunker. And we're gonna look at some of these. When your ball is in a bunker, you get a penalty if you test the condition of the sand to learn information for your next stroke with your hand, a club, a rake, or any other object. So you can't touch the sand for the purposes of testing the conditions of the sand. Touch the sand with the club right behind or right in front of your ball. So this is a no-no, right? This makes sense. you don't want to leave this mark. We don't want to allow players to be able to leave this mark so that they'll have something to aim at when they take a swing out of the bunker. As you make practice swings, you can't touch the sand, and as you make your back swing from the stroke, you can't touch the sand, right? So we saw Patrick Reed get into this issue last year with touching, or maybe earlier this year, with touching the sand in his backstroke. You can't; that's not allowed under the rules. And then we have a long list of things that you can do in a bunker, and you won't get penalized for. So it's not a penalty if you dig in with your feet to take a stance. It's not a penalty if you lean on a club to stay balanced or prevent yourself from falling. It's not a penalty to place your clubs or your equipment in the bunker. You know, you could actually drag your whole bag into the bunker. You may cause some eyebrow raises from who you're playing with, saying, "What are you doing?" And you're going to get penalized for that. But you could actually do that. You can actually take your whole bag in the bunker if you'd like. You can take actions permitted by rules, such as measuring, marking, lifting, and replacing. Smooth the bunker to care for the course. And then this one's interesting because people think you get penalized for this, but you could, you know, after you've hit the shot, after you've played the bunker shot, if you strike the sand in frustration or even anger, it's considered poor etiquette, and we may penalize you or have a discussion with you based on your etiquette, your poor etiquette as a rules committee if you play in one of our events. But there's actually not a penalty for striking the sand in frustration. Loose impediments in the penalty area may be touched or removed without penalty, including when your ball and the loose impediment are in the same penalty area. And again, if you move a loose impediment in the penalty area, right, you can see this player here moving all this loose straw and this dead grass. He's allowed to do that. But if you cause your ball to move, you're going to get a one-stroke penalty, and you must replace the ball. So again, you need to be cautious about moving these things around the ball. What happens if you don't replace the ball is a question we sometimes get asked. So if you cause your ball to move and you don't replace it, you've effectively played from a wrong place, which is a general penalty. You're going to get a two-stroke penalty in stroke play or a loss of hole in match play. So in a penalty area, we're now allowed to touch the ground at any time in the penalty area. So this is another great example of how a bunker and a penalty area differ. You can touch the ground in a penalty area at any time, including when you're making practice swings, grounding the club in front of or behind the ball. But it's important to know that you cannot improve the lie of the ball, the area of your stance, or the area of your swing. So you can't make improvements to those areas, but you can ground your club. So that really wraps up what we wanted to cover in our first webinar. James, I'll let you take a look at the questions, see if anyone has any more questions. We appreciate everybody getting involved for this. This is our first one, so I wanted to make sure I didn't put too many slides or too much information in here. But I'm hopeful that we can get together, maybe keep Fridays as an option, and do a couple more of these as we go through the current COVID-19 situation and have to social distance and stay away from each other. So I'm happy to put a couple more of these on if we found them beneficial. James, do we have any more questions?
Hey, Kelly. One question that was a few minutes ago was explain the point of reference in lateral relief, which I assume meaning from a penalty area, but I don't know if you want to.
So the point of reference from a penalty area, like for lateral. So this is a picture of so this is a picture of a red penalty area. The point of reference when you're talking about lateral relief is going to be the spot where your ball last crossed the edge of the penalty area. So the spot where your ball last crossed the edge is that reference point, and that's where you take those two club links from.
And then one other question, just to ask to go over the slide on hitting a ball on the other side of a penalty area. I was reading some other questions, so I'm not sure which slide that specifically was referring to, but maybe on.
Yeah, we don't really have a good picture of that. I was using this picture. If we imagined, I don't think the player is actually playing this way, but if you imagined if the hole were up here in the right-hand corner and you're playing over this penalty area, Again, if it's yellow, and this is why it's important to go back to where the reference points where you last cross the edge, right? So when we play the shot, we cross the edge here, and then maybe we carried the lake, right, and it hit the general area, it might have hit the green or the rough over here, and then it kicks back into the penalty area. That's now our last edge of the penalty area that's been crossed. So for a red penalty area, like the one that's marked here, if this is red, we can go up here and use that last edge where it crossed as the reference point, take 2 club lengths and drop with lateral relief. If it's yellow, and this is where some players get hung up, if this were yellow and our last crossed penalty area edge was up over here, we've got to use that back on the line option. We don't have the lateral option, so we've got to use that back on the line option, take the flag stick and the point where we last crossed and go back and drop on this other side of the penalty area. So I hope that helps and makes sense. I wish we had a better picture of a full lake. Maybe we'll get that for next time.
Yeah, I think that that one other aspect to this, the new rules of 2019 was removing the final option of from red penalty areas to use the opposite side. That's no longer in the rules of golf, but it is part of the committee procedures book for allowing it as a local rule. So the tournament, the committee in charge of competition would have to implement that local rule for opposite side relief from a lateral or red penalty area.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the old book, James is talking about, the old book had the opposite margin option for a red penalty area, for a red hazard back before 2019, opposite margin. And that's been taken out of the book, but given to us as a local rule if we ever want to implement that at a golf course. And, if maybe we have a specific hole where that makes sense, we can say, hey, on the 4th hole, the opposite edge local rule is in effect to give players the option to drop over there. But that is only a local rule, and it's been removed as a default option for penalty areas.
One other that just came in was back on the line relief. Is it 1 club length or 2 from the reference point?
Yeah, for the yellow. So that's going to be 1 club length. So the only time we're going to get the 2 club lengths is for the lateral. When we go back on the line, that's 1 club length. And the last thing we wanted to show everyone, I think I'm going the wrong way in my slides. We wanted to point out, to thank you first for taking the time to do this. We're going to put this up as a video, hopefully on the website as we do our webinars. We also wanted to point you to Youth on Course. So for those of you that don't know about Youth on Course, we got this great program for kids that are 6 to 18. They sign up for a nominal fee to be a member, and they can show up to 1,200 courses nationwide and at least 18 to 20 here in Maryland, where they'll show up and play around the golf for $5. And the way that this program works, once you're a member and you show up and you pay your $5 to play your round, the MSGA actually subsidizes the green fees to the courses. So the courses don't lose money. We actually pay the remaining balance of that fee. So if the junior fee is $15 to play a round, we send the club a $10 check to cover that greens fee. And I just wanted to point you to our website. We're going to do these free webinars, but if you'd like to donate to Youth on Course, you can go to the main MSGA website. Under Join, you'll see Youth on Course, and then we have a donate button if you'd like to donate $5 or $10 to Youth on Course. But it's a really awesome program. James, Kim, and a couple others actually, they did a 100-hole hike last year to raise money for it. And we have other initiatives in place to raise money to keep this program supported so that we can help grow junior golf. And I think it's just been a great program for us. So again, thank you for joining us. James, thanks for helping out, and we'll see you guys next time.